All right, everyone. Russia has been drumming up its new missile tech, saying basically, with no aside, oh yeah, our new missiles can penetrate U.S. anti-missile defenses easily. Now, on one hand, that's not really, physically speaking, that impressive since they already could. Our anti-missile system, at best, under the optimum conditions, is about 50-50. That's with our newer systems. With the older ones, is like 2 in 10 or some crazy number. In other words, if Russia were to shoot 10 nuclear weapons at us, we would expect probably that 5 of them would make it to their targets. We would have shot down several. Probably one would fizzle on the launch pad and blow up there, or not make it to the target, hit something else. But we'd probably knock a few out of the air. But most, half of them would hit their targets. That's underwhelming. It's underwhelming. You'd think that by now we would have worked out some solution to this. I've always thought, why don't they just take high-speed drones, equip them with energy cannons, which they can now actually use, and then use them as missile interceptors or something. Something you'd pilot it like in a video game, and some dude sitting there in a bunker literally pilots the drone in, fires on the missile like it's a game of Star Fox, and then you call it a day. Why don't you do something like that? Then I don't know. The Pentagon has, however many unlimited numbers of dollars for its budget, and still can't figure out how to knock a missile out of the air. Missiles, those things that have been, in consistent military use now since the 1940s. It's a real big problem. But Russia is then actually telling a little white lie at this point. I gotta say the U.S. is technically right on this one. This does amount to a new arms race. However, it's not just Russia that's engaging in it. The Pentagon's we've got new anti-missile. We're working to upgrade our existing nuclear stockpile base. Trump has come out and told them, hey, I want battlefield nukes. We haven't used those since the mid-1950s. It was deemed a bad idea. By the way, I oppose their use. They're basically worthless anyway. Battlefield-style nukes, as in small, nuclear weapons that can be used to attack an armored convoy or a group of troops or a base, something like that. It would be a low-yield nuclear detonation. I'm surprised they haven't talked about bringing back the neutron bomb or something like that. By the way, you should Google that. It's an interesting subject. That and the Davy Crockett device. Look, the history of nuclear weapons is rife with strange designs. It's not just, hey, it's a nuke. There are different styles of nuclear weapons. There's atomic, there's boosted fission, there's the fully modern designs in various forms that do different things. It's much like with black powder. Now, it's not just gunpowder. You can manufacture it in different ways. The older style powder, of course, consisting of powdered sulfur, charcoal, and then saltpeter. Depending on the amount used, you can make a flash powder, you can make a smoke powder, the conventional gun black powder used in muskets and rifles at the time, all sorts of stuff. Same ingredients, same basic concept, totally different effects for different uses. Of course, you're not going to use smoke powder to fire your musket. It might look kind of funny, but it won't work very well. And it'd be kind of like throwing a marble at your enemy's head, I suppose, at that point. Russia is definitely engaged in an arms race. The only reason that they came out and crowed about this, the same with their nuclear torpedo design, which may or may not even be a real thing. This, by the way, is probably real, the nuclear torpedo. I don't know, even odds maybe on whether it's as large, really a tsunami weapon, basically. When they talk about these strange, unconventional designs or their new tech, they are quite clearly engaged in an arms race. It's partially diplomatic, it's partially a psychological war. But that's the way the Cold War was. It wasn't really just, hey, we've developed a new class of weapons. Shiver in your boots, our enemies. No, part of it was, hey, we've got a new class of weapons. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, it's not real. We're trying to justify more spending. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, haha, the world doesn't know if it's real. It's to breed uncertainty. That's an advantage. When your enemy's uncertain of your status, it's a really good thing. It makes them far less likely to do any stupid shit and attack you. This is part of the Cold War grand chessboard posturing all along. This used to happen all the time. You can look back. You don't even need to have lived through most of it. You can look back. It's well noted through history. You can look at fictional accounts. It's the same thing. What happens in Dr. Strangelove? By the way, why do you think that I bring up Dr. Strangelove every time I talk about Russia? It's an interesting movie. If you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. I'm telling you. It will change your perspective on the whole thing, with a layer of comedy. Of course, nuclear war can be quite funny because, it could be the result of a total accident. Some algorithm, some robot somewhere decides it's time to end the world of man. No, whoops. You know, here comes iRobots. It's the rise of the mechanistic life forms, I suppose, at that point. There won't be much real organic biology going on the surface beyond the maybe colonial bacteria, beyond the unicellular stage. Be some dandelions and cockroaches, I suppose. What a wonderful planet. It'll be very yellow and filled with insects. And they're constantly going to be eating one another. Eventually, you'll have carnivorous dandelions. Yeah, that'd be funny. Poisonous dandelions, then they absorb the dead cockroach chitin and incorporate it into their own cells and become strange mutants. We'll have a little bit of a weird Fallout world, but Russia is in an arms race. There's no other reason for them to come out and say, well, we can penetrate the U.S. defenses. Then Putin comes out doing a little bit of the double meaning strategy there. It's a propaganda strategy. Sort of, Trump does this too, by the way. You may have noticed. He did this on guns, it appears. Putin comes out and says, well, we're not threatening anybody. It's not an arms race or anything. Come on, guys. It's not an arms race. We just developed new missiles that can penetrate U.S. defenses. But, I mean, why would the U.S. think that that was aimed at them just because we're invoking the U.S. in talking about missiles designed to carry a nuclear payload? What does that have to do with anything? We could be talking about wanting to bomb Kazakhstan. What about that? What about if we go to war with Madagascar? You know, we're going to need those missiles because otherwise, you know, if we have to land there, we'll get plague. You know, and then they'll close their port. We won't even be able to get out. We'll all die. No, it's clearly an arms race statement. Just as the nuclear torpedo thing, this was what was speculated. What was speculated is that the basic design isn't even real, at least at the degree that they're talking about. And that it was shown on Russian state TV and spoken of openly, as opposed to remaining classified, specifically so the Pentagon would see that and get like confused, they'd get worried. It's a strategy that Reagan especially employed against the USSR, make them think we're working on all sorts of weird super weapons, so that they drive themselves under trying to pay for modernized weapons, trying to keep up. You know, the arms race, the space race, and every other race. The peace race. Again, tip of the hat to Dr. Strangelove there. Yeah, you can cause your opponent to go completely apeshit. Cause them to suffer a collective cultural breakdown. The USSR suffered an economic and cultural breakdown, split apart. Now we have Russia. Russia is still large. It still has a significant population and a very large nuclear stockpile. When they say, well, we modernized our missiles again, they're shiny and new. You know, the Satan missile is gone. You know, the one with, I think, 8 3-megaton warheads that can wipe out an area the size of the whole New York metro region. You know, now we've got something that's faster and, you know, they're not rusted out. They probably actually launch. The other big problem right now is that our own missile defenses are almost as aged as most of Russia's missiles. Yeah, we've fallen behind maybe a China in terms of our nuclear capabilities, missile per missile. Also, unfortunately, you got to realize again, our designs are far smaller. Most of our missiles are 1 or 2 megatons. Most of Russia's missiles are in excess of 3 to 5 megatons, and with China, it pushes 10. Their main missile, I think, has 10 megatons of blast. That's a little bit of a, you know, the fact that ours are more reliable, and the fact that nobody really wants, you know, 1,000, you know, single megaton missiles hitting them any more than a few Satan missiles. In all honesty, it would kill most of the people in China. Don't we have a little bit of a real gap at this point in terms of the number and even maybe the sophistication if they have developed new missile designs? Let's assume that the report is absolutely true. Oh, you know, our new missiles, they're faster, they're more stealthy, you can do what we want. Wouldn't that be a problem? I think it would. I think we could get caught with our pants down and end up getting nuked without significant enough retaliatory capabilities. Right at a time, by the way, where our politicians are trying to disarm the domestic population, probably so we can be enslaved by communists or something. Yeah, then all of a sudden they put back on the red uniforms. They're like, what? Joke's on you. April Fools. It was all just a ruse. You know, the breakdown of the USSR was part of a really weird long-term grand chessboard strategy. I'm just joking at this point, but it is an arms race. It is part of a Cold War. We are in a Cold War. And it's getting colder. It's not getting better. That's the problem. Even with Trump. Trump comes out, pays lip service to Yal, shake Putin's hand, and talk with him. Things aren't getting better. It's probably, that's the biggest problem I might have at this point with his foreign policy. He's not coming out because of the Mueller stuff. And this is the fault of the Democrats primarily, but Trump should know better than to play their game on this one. What he needs to do is come out and say, there's no collusion with Russia. I'm going to normalize relations with them to the best of my ability. You go ahead and start a nuclear war if you want to. He already did this with McCain and Graham. Remember when they weren't on board with him before, going to meet with the Russians, and McCain's like, oh, well, you shouldn't be doing that, butcherous, insane Putin and stuff. And he's like, oh, well, John McCain and Lindsey Graham are too busy trying to start a nuclear war to work with me on like the ACA or anything else, basically casting a shadow on them. That's the right strategy to use. Most people no longer have the stomach to really want to spend, I don't know, another 3 or 4 decades in a Cold War. Okay, we get good music back. Maybe we have another Depeche Mode. That's great. Bungees come back in neon colors. People wearing like zebra striped pants and I don't know, snorting lots of coke. We get hair metal back. Okay, I can deal with that. That's just fine. Trust me, sign me up for another Duran Duran #1 hits album. It's great. But do we really need the nuclear standoff to do that? I would think we could just agree that that culture was better and more fun anyway. And that, you know, modern times like 2000s, 2010s is boring. Why don't we just agree that other than like YouTube, other than the internet, it's boring, and go back to those styles and that music which was talented, and not have a nuclear war? How about that? You know, we could just have a collective sort of cultural shift. The Russians should do the same. Like I've got a bar of soap from the early 1980s from the Soviet Union, Spodra soap actually. And it's fascinating. I like to look at old weird vintage items. Now, these are communists. Now, I hate communism as an ideology. I certainly wouldn't have liked the USSR when it existed. Had I been, like, mature at the time, it would have been, like, you know, fucking crazy. But the stuff that was left, the cultural things, the TV shows and movies and the weird, like, paraphernalia, it's interesting. It's historical. It's relevant. You know, it'd be funny, you know, 100 years after the nuclear war, someone finds my charred radioactive corpse, and I'm sitting next to, like, my goodie chest, and there's, like, Russian pins, and they're like, oh, this was a Russian espionage agent. And then they find my books, and they write up in the history books, oh, Styx Hexenhammer, a well-known, like, Russian espionage agent, probably caused this problem. And then they find a bunch of spoons in a circle around me. That would be great. Yeah, please make fanfic of me after the nuclear war. That would be, like, the greatest symbol of having made it in the world. That's about all. Peace out.